Hello, I'm Jeremy Rivera, your Unscripted SEO podcast host. I'm here with Bradley Benner of Semantic Mastery. For the simple folk who haven't had the honor and pleasure of running into you yet, give an introduction. Let people know a little bit of your history. We don't need to go too deep into it. We've got a previous episode, a previous interview if people want to go deeper into the weeds. But I want them to know that you know what I know that you know.
Well, thanks for having me, Jeremy. Yeah, Bradley Benner from Semantic Mastery and Semantic Links. Semantic Mastery is my information product kind of coaching business for teaching local marketing, local SEO, AI implementation now for local marketing and local SEO, also for business development. But Semantic Links is my white label kind of SEO fulfillment service. We do fulfillment services for other local marketing agencies, primarily off-page signal fulfillment, such as link building, citation building, branded assets, press releases, that kind of stuff. But we do some on-page consultation, full SEO audits, etc. I got into SEO back in about 2010-ish to learn how to generate leads from Google for my own contracting business. One thing led to another. I became fascinated with it, fell in love with kind of the whole process of being able to manipulate Google, and did both kind of SEO and lead generation for my own business, but also for some contractors that I was working with at the time because I was an electrical contractor. And then kind of because I got fairly good at it, and part of it is just because I was so interested in it. And so I started monetizing lead gen assets and things like that when working with contractors. And over the course of a couple of years, I built up enough of a revenue, enough of income that I was able to actually stop doing electrical work and go full time into marketing and SEO, local SEO. And so that was around 2012. And then from that point on, over the years, I ended up developing Semantic Mastery, which is our information product business, because I got a pretty good knack at being able to teach the concepts in a way that's easy for people to understand. And so, and then just around 2020, actually 2022, right in the beginning of 2022 is when I started my white label services. And by far, that's taken off more than anything else. That is my highest revenue generating business. So link building is a very near and dear to my heart now, which is kind of funny because I used to hate link building. I always used to use outsourced white label fulfillment providers for my own agency. But I needed to find better, more effective links out of necessity for my
Mhm.
clients' performance. And so
Yeah.
that's why I developed my own link building service after many months of testing, to come up with what we're going to be talking about today, which is completely relevant. And that is links with relevance. So that's what I think our topic is going to be about today. But yeah, semantic links is kind of my highest revenue generator. Semantic mastery is more of a passion project for me because I like to teach and coach. And that's about it. I still run a local SEO agency too, by the way, it's called Tree Care HQ. I work with tree service contractors only. I niched down in 2020 to just working with tree service contractors. So I do more than just marketing and SEO for them now. I also build AI operating systems for them, help them to integrate business growth systems, that kind of stuff. So
It seems to me it's one of the upsides. There's silver linings when it comes to all of these AI tooling everywhere, right? Like I have 10 conversations and we tend to focus on well, we're having a brain drain and people are outsourcing their thinking to it. And, there's hallucinations, which are, destroying people's trust and people are overusing it. But I think on the operations side, like there's a huge unlock, like the silver lining aspect of AI where smart application, is kind of reducing kind of that capital workload requirements to bring some of these ideas to market. And so in-house teams or consultants are able to, have the idea for a solution, which, you know, 10 10 years ago, it would have taken an extra $10,000,
yeah,
$20,000 worth of coding, investment and finding the right person and then dev and spec and development. But now it can be a weekend, a couple of weeks, maybe a month of figuring out, oh, hey, you've got this hole in your
yeah,
workflow process. Let's figure out how to fill that.
yeah. I agree. I mean, I think the most important thing is like one of the things I found with talking with contractors, tree guys mainly, but I've talked with a couple of outside of that industry about building an operating system for them. Is that a lot of the times they don't have their processes defined very well, and so that forces them to do it because that's the only way to build any sort of an AI operating system is you have to clearly define the processes and have them kind of mapped out on everything, and then it can be built. But
Yes.
if they don't have clear processes in their own business, you can't automate it because then you're just automating a sloppy process, and it becomes a hell of a it becomes more work maintaining it and trying to rearrange things properly than it does just like to just do it manually because you add another layer of complexity on top of an un inefficient process, an inefficient process. You know what I mean? And that is having AI then, which is also performing an inefficient process. So therefore it compounds or it kind of it just compounds the problems is what I found. So that's something that I do when I have a chat with a contractor. I basically have them walk me through their processes and that tell me exactly what happens when a lead comes in and how long does it take and all that kind of stuff. And we map all that out, and then what I do is just go back. I feed all that data just from a Google Meet, right? So I get
Yeah.
the transcript, the recording, and then
Yeah.
processes it through Claude or I use Cursor for everything. So I basically work inside of Cursor, but I just process all that through Cursor and it spits out basically a proposal with a plan for building that automation, et cetera. And then I just go back and present it to the contractor. So it's been really interesting because part of what I've been teaching at Semantic Mastery for years is really developing SOPs. So I'm really
Mhm.
good at looking at a process and kind of breaking it down into components that I've been able to over the years kind of write draft SOPs. I do those myself and
Yeah.
then hand them to, subordinates, personnel. But it's really no different with AI. It's the exact same as you have to document the process in a very granular way and then submit it to AI, whatever agent you're working with or model you're working with, except I do have to say something to kind of qualify that slightly. And that is I've actually found that, especially more recently because the models have advanced so much that when you're working in like an IDE environment, like I work in Cursor because Cursor has hands, it can go out and create things and touch tools and all that kind of stuff. And so what I found is actually if I document the process and then clearly define the process and what the desired outcome is, and then I ask the model like, hey, here's what the process is as it currently stands, but I want you to develop a workflow or pipeline that then manages this process and look for ways to make it more efficient, to improve it.
Mhm.
Because that's the process that the contractor may be using doesn't mean that that's the most efficient way. And
Yes.
usually the models will find workarounds and things to make it more efficient, better, less expensive, more effective, whatever, on their own, things that I wouldn't have thought about or the contractor wouldn't have thought about. And I've learned just through experience over the last few months of doing this that instead of being so rigid and saying, here's the process, build an automation for this, you send the process to the model and say, here's what it is. This is the desired outcome. This is why we want it or the client wants it. And can you improve this process? Show me what you got. Show me what you're
Mhm.
working with. You know what I mean? And then it will come back. And usually, like I always work in plan mode to begin with, anyways. And so it ends up sometimes a very lengthy discussion back and forth before we ever agree to a build plan, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does, and I think it was Melissa Pop, who I interviewed, and she said, "Don't accept the first draft
That's right.
of any plan given to you from any LLM model." That should be like rule number one for anybody that's using these tools. Like, you gotta go further. Like, you
Yeah.
have to you can't outsource and kick back. As my last interview 5 minutes ago, Mark Pearson's like, half the problem with LLMs and AI is people are just, chatting at it, sitting back, and then hitting send, and
Yeah.
it's not going to do the trick. It's going to lead to compounding problems. So we have to think critically about these superpowers that we're being given as consultants, these superpowers we're being given as business owners, as SMB owners, as consultants, SEOs. These are very powerful tools, and so we need to treat them with the respect that the superpower deserves.
That's right. I agree.
I was curious since our last time that we talked, it's been more than a year, at least. I can't keep track of time anymore, but I know it's at least a year since we last dove into link building. We talked about it from your historical perspective, but we're kind of looking at a big change in the game,
Mhm.
where I think I could phrase it this way. Google is not as does not have a solid monopoly on the AI search space right now. Um, and whether that was, a flub of how they rushed Gemini to market, whether the other snuck up, or just the weird quirk of, oh my gosh, it's 2024, ChatGPT arrives in everybody's mind, as a cultural phenomenon moment, and it wasn't attached to Google. Google didn't trigger it. Um, but it seems like we have a more level playing field, and we have more areas to optimize, and the uniqueness is there. What you do, the last two LLM consultant folk that I talked to, what you do for visibility in GPT might not work that well in Claude,
That's right.
and you're now it gives you different paths to go down. There's some commonality. Um, in what way do you think that applies to, off-page optimization, and how should we be thinking about that off-page part of the SEO equation?
Well, it's interesting because, my link building agency is called, or off page white label agency, I should call it, is called Semantic Links. And it was based in 2022 when I launched it in January of 2022, after again, months and months of testing in 2021. And I kind of came across, what should have been fully obvious way sooner, which is it's not some stupid third party metric like DA or DR or trust flow or anything else that matters about whether a link is valuable or not. What matters is whether it's relevant. And we're in the AI era where language models run everything. Behind everything is a language model now, right? And so because of that, it's all based upon what they understand about our language, which means relevance, right? So relevance and database relations, kind of vector search and all that stuff. And so like I totally got away from, even when I teach now or I coach or when I'm talking to clients, my either local SEO clients, we don't talk about local SEO much because they're tree guys and they don't know anything about local SEO, nor do they care. They just want their
Right.
phone to ring. But when I'm talking to SEO professionals selling white label services, I don't even bring up the word keywords anymore. I talk about search queries because it's not a keyword based algorithm and it hasn't been for years. And I still see, as a white label provider, I provide services to other marketing agencies and SEO professionals. And I'm telling you, 80% of the work that comes across my desk, they're still optimizing like it's 2020. It drives me up a wall, by the way. It drives me up a wall because these agencies and so-called professionals are out there selling SEO services to unsuspecting local businesses, taking their hard-earned money and saying that we're going to get you results. And they're doing stuff that has been outdated for years. And then they wonder why they're not getting their clients results. But they're still taking their money. You know what I mean? And that drives me up a wall. It really does. I think it's unethical. You should keep up with what is working today if you're going to be selling it as a service. And if you're not, then you shouldn't be selling it. You should go elsewhere, enter another industry. Um, but when it comes to, again, back to link building, it's links with relevance that matter. And I kind of discovered this through a lot of testing in 2021. And so when I realized that by looking at, look, if you want to use a third party metric like DA, DR, trust flow, whatever, as kind of a secondary metric after determining that a potential link source is relevant to what it's going to be linking to, then fine. Use that secondary metric as your determining factor is to,
Right.
but you should look at relevance first. And here's why. Because look, no longer are we pushing traditional metrics. We shouldn't be as SEOs, right? What we should be doing is creating relevance and entity associations, right? Or basically who the brand is, what products or services do they provide, and which locations or area do they provide their products or services. Those are called, like, our jobs as SEOs now is not about pushing metrics. It should be about creating associations, strengthening those associations, and forcing the models and the algorithms to recognize those associations. That's our job. And that's why relevant links matter, because And here's the thing, we build links. Almost 90% of every links that we place for clients are at tier 1 are brand anchors. Okay.
Yeah.
Or what I call a compound anchor, which is a brand plus type of an anchor. Brand plus a product or service term, or brand plus a location or area term, or brand plus product or service plus location or area. Right.
Right.
And, and, and
McAllister's
and
tree
that's again
service.
because what are we trying to do? We're trying to create associations. When I teach local SEO, like on-page optimization, I teach entity association statements, aka a semantic triple, as the SEO title, right? Because I look at the main optimization elements of a page as kind of like six points really, but there's two components to one of them, and that is number one is the URL, number two is titles, but the titles includes a meta title and AH1. Right? Because there's a meta title, also known as an SEO title, but then there's the H1, which is the page or post title. So there
Yes.
are two components to titles. I'll get back to that in a minute. Then there's headings, which are H2s. Then there's subheadings, H3s, 4s, 5s, etc. Then there's media and internal links. So there's really 6 kind of main optimization elements of a page, but there's 2 components to titles. And so I always recommend when optimizing for search, you should optimize the SEO title in a very strict semantic triple format, entity associate. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is where we do it type thing. But then the H1 becomes a restatement of the entities that were referenced in the SEO title. And I say restatement, not repeat. You
Hmm.
restate them using entity variants, but more of a compelling kind of like advertising copywriting type headline. Like
Yeah.
it's more for the humans. The SEO title, the meta title is for the bots, for the models. But the H1 is for the human visitor. They see and go into traditional Google search, they're going to see the blue link. It matches the queries that they're searching for. So they click it. When they land on that page, what do they see? The H1. That should be compelling and a lot more conversational, but still referencing the entities that were mentioned in the SEO title, but using
Yeah.
variants, right? And so my point is, if we are talking about creating these associations, which can be done via what I'm talking about, always having the brand in close proximity to relevant entities, whether it's product or service entities or location or area entities or a combination of all of those things. That's our job, is to try to get that brand reference nearby what's relevant. So as it relates to links, back to the original question, links should be number one. I think almost every single link that should be pointed direct to the money site should be a brand anchor or some variation of a brand anchor. Like I said, a compound anchor. And then it should be placed within relevant content, because then now you've got an anchor text link with the brand name that
Hmm.
is now within relevant content, meaning it's nearby entities that are related or relevant to that business and or the area that they serve.
Yeah.
Then if you publish that post onto a blog or site where the overall topical themes of the site are also relevant to ultimately what it's linking to, that provides a stronger signal from that entity association, if that makes sense. And then if you're looking at the backlink profiles that are already pointing to the referring domain that you're going to publish the post on that contains a contextual link to the client's asset, then you should be looking at the backlink profile to determine what is the relevance of the link profile pointing to this domain. So there's basically like 3 layers or levels of relevance matching that can be achieved when you're doing link building. And all of that strengthens those entity associations between the brand, products or services, and the locations or area. And so I totally believe 100% wholeheartedly that third-party metrics are useless. What we should be focusing on is relevance to strengthen those entity associations.
So then the trick is, because LLMs, as far as I know, and correct me if you have a citation, they're not using links like Google does for page rank purposes or for filtering and quality. Their LLM models are more interested in just the mention level and connecting the domain by association, but
That's right.
not deeply. So therefore, you can hit two birds with one stone by that semantic coupling that you're talking about of brand plus a service. Like, if you're permacast walls, you'd say, hey, we're permacast walls in Florida, or we're permacast walls delivering your concrete walls, or if you're doing oxygen monitors, we're pure air. your source for oxygen monitors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the anchor text that you want to link, because then it's also a mention, and then you get your hit on the LLM side, and you get your link on the backlink side. Is that the
Yeah, because what you said about like LLMs aren't looking at page rank, link equity. That's not what they're looking at. Links are used. That's how the models and the algorithms, the bots, that's how they crawl the web. That's how they navigate around the web. That's why I just mentioned the main optimization elements of a page, right? URL is always the first touch point because that's how the bots found the page to begin with, right? So the URL is the way that I look at how language models look at links are navigation elements, but are they linked to or navigating to or from a relevant
Mhm.
source? And if there's not,
Mhm.
there's a disconnect. Like, what is the
Yeah.
purpose of this link if there's not an association between the two properties that makes a relevant association? I mean, if there's a mismatch there, then what is the purpose of that link? And so that's why, like you mentioned, a brand reference, that's a citation, right? A
Yeah.
citation is a published mention of usually at least 2 out of 4 data points that we in the SEO industry would call NAPW, name, address, phone number, and website. A citation is a brand mention plus any one of those other data points. So brand and website, brand and phone, brand and address, something like that. And that's what I consider the difference between a structured and an unstructured citation. A structured citation is going to be very strict, name, address, phone number, with or without a website, but in a very structured format, like business directory listings. But unstructured citations are brand mentions with one of those other data points elsewhere on the web. So press releases, branded assets, brand mentions on blog posts, things like that. Those all can act as unstructured citations. And that's what influences LLM or AI search visibility right now more than anything. Don't get me wrong, you can still and should still optimize on page to
Mhm.
increase the chances of the brand's domain or website being referenced in the AI or cited in the AI search results. But the quickest way to actually improve AI search visibility right now is through third-party mentions, right? So citations. A high authority, highly relevant, or hyper-local, depending on what the search prompt or query is. When you're query, if it's a local search query, which is what I focus on, then having brand references on hyper-local sources can help. On highly relevant sources, so topically relevant sources can help. High authority properties like structured citations, like all the big directories, Yext and, Yelp and all those types of things, super pages, et cetera. But then also, like high authority, like media and press releases. Press releases work really, really good for helping to improve AI search visibility because you get brand references on high authority media and news style, like freshness factor type properties that
Yeah.
the LLMs like to cite.
Yeah. Freshness is definitely one of the primary factors I'm seeing right
Yeah,
now in LLMs.
100%.
So unfortunately, I didn't book. I think you did hit the ball though really far to out into that field of exactly the answer to that itch that I had in the back of my mind of what is it about links that we need to be worried about right now. And honestly, like I feel kind of relieved because it's a
Good.
pretty solid strategy. It works on both folds, and the value of links. Like the arrival of LLMs almost makes link building easier to justify in the budget now.
It does, in my opinion. And I love the fact that because language has become the forefront of the technology, search, and everything that we use, we got away from that spammy stuff that we'd been doing as when Google was the only kid on the block.
Hmm.
We didn't have to be, all we had to do was spam stuff up to the top of the search results and it would convert because there wasn't other options. But
Yeah.
now, as you mentioned earlier when we started this interview, um, because Google's no longer the only kid on the block, there are so many options for consumers to to use for search that we have to focus more on not just getting exposure across all of these different surfaces, but also in the copywriting and the marketing side, the actual direct response marketing side of things, the human element side of things. And so I like that because it's almost forced us to get back to more traditional marketing and copywriting techniques and skills, but
Yeah.
still have the technology component too, but in a lot less of a spammy way. And to be honest with you, I was never proud of some of the spammy stuff that I did as an SEO, but it worked, so I did it. But now I'm really a lot more focused on, like, we should be like, the structure of a page, the main optimization elements that I've described a couple of times, that should be for the models and for the
Yeah.
bots. But the paragraph text between those main optimization elements should be for the human. It should be to convert the human, to answer their questions. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I teach how to optimize right now. And it's really brought us back to, I think, a much kind of more sustainable practice in this industry.
I absolutely agree. Anybody who wants to hear a little bit more from this guy, go to his semantic mastery course. He's got a ton of videos out
Oh yeah,
there.
on the YouTube channel.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'll make sure in the show notes his links for his semantic link service. If anybody's an SEO and needs some backup firepower executing on SEO, go check it out. Make sure it's all linked in the show notes and on unscriptedseo.com. Thanks for stopping
Thanks,
by,
Jeremy.
Bradley. Bye
Appreciate you,
bye.
man. See you later.